Imagine for a second that a brilliant scientist, someone who has spent the last 5 years figuring out exactly how to coax a very finicky cell line into producing a life-saving protein, gets a new job.
Right.
They pack up their desk, they hand in their badge, and they walk out the door. And, the notebooks are left behind, sure.
Yeah, the physical paper is there.
Exactly. But the actual hard-won expertise, the subtle flick of the wrist when pipetting, or the intuitive knowledge of exactly what color the liquid should be before it hits the centrifuge that literally walks out the door with them.
It's just gone.
Completely gone. Or picture a massive humming laboratory freezer. Sometime over a long holiday weekend, a compressor fails.
Oh, that is a nightmare scenario.
Right. The temperature slowly rises, just quietly degrading priceless, custom-built genetic constructs that took, honestly, years of grant money to design.
And see, this is the silent hemorrhage of modern science. We are generating data at just an unprecedented rate, but the mechanisms holding the context of that data together, the human expertise and the physical materials, they're fundamentally breaking down.
Yeah, and this isn't science fiction. This is an invisible, massive drain on human progress happening right now.
Absolutely.
And today, we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating 2026 perspective piece from Nature Communications. It's titled, Knowledge Preservation in the Era of Big Science and AI. And we're going to figure out how to stop this bleed. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
The authors argue that the entire foundation of how we record scientific progress is cracking under the weight of big science.
Yeah, and to understand the solutions they propose, we really have to look at how the biosciences have completely transformed over the last decade.
Right, it's not the same field it used to be.
Not at all. It isn't merely that scientists are, pipetting faster using automated robots. The fundamental nature of what constitutes data has totally fractured.
Fractured how? What does that look like in practice?
Well, we now have these heterogeneous multimodal data sets. So a single research paper today might involve a physical wet lab experiment, a high-throughput genomic sequence, and then on top of that, a massive AI-driven computational simulation designed to predict how a newly engineered cell will behave.
Wait, but science has always generated data, though. I mean, a researcher in the 1950s filled up notebooks, ran experiments, and published a paper.
Sure, yeah.
I have a hard time believing scientists just suddenly forgot how to organize a filing cabinet. Are we just, overcomplicating things?
I get why it looks like that, but it is the profound interdependency of the modern data that is entirely new. You can't just read a physical notebook to understand a modern experiment anymore.
Because it's not just words on a page.
Exactly. To even look at the data, you might need a highly customized Python script that feeds into a specialized bioinformatics pipeline. And that pipeline might only run on a specific cloud server architecture.
Oh, wow.
And if a traditional peer-reviewed journal tries to capture this, it just fails. The strict page limits force researchers to omit those crucial procedural nuances.
So they just toss a digital supplement at the end of the PDF and call it a day.
Basically, yeah. But those supplements are notoriously fragile. They often contain broken hyperlinks, or they point to software dependencies that haven't been updated in 3 years and literally no longer run.
Right.
And on the physical side, laboratory freezers are just packed with custom cell lines and mutant strains. Over time, the labels wear off, or the spreadsheets tracking them get lost on some graduating student's old hard drive.
Or the freezer simply breaks.
Right, the physical asset denatures.
So the analog storage methods, the printed journal page, and the physical freezer, they have been completely outgrown by the sheer scale of the output.
Precisely.
It is like having a library with millions of books, but somebody went through and tore off all the covers and burned the card catalog. The information is technically in the building, but mechanically it is impossible to retrieve.
That's a great analogy.
Think about your own digital workspace for a second. If someone had to step in tomorrow and recreate your last major project using only your saved files, could they do it?
Probably not.
Right. That anxiety you might be feeling is happening on a global scale with life-saving research. So let me quickly sum up this first part.
Go for it.
The scale of data has totally outgrown our analog storage methods. And a question for you, the listener. Have you ever tried to follow a recipe only to find the author skipped crucial steps because they thought they were obvious? That's modern science right now.
Which brings us to the tragedy of null results. This is where the loss of data goes from being a passive structural failure to an active, catastrophic waste of global resources.
The dead ends?
Exactly. Academic publishing has a systemic, deeply entrenched bias against findings that do not support a hypothesis or, experiments that simply fail to replicate.
Yeah, nobody wants to publish a failure.
Reviewers and editors overwhelmingly favor novel, positive outcomes. They want the breakthrough.
I mean, I get the psychology behind that. A journal wants to publish the cure for a disease, not the 10,000 chemical compounds that didn't do anything at all.
Sure.
But the paper argues hiding those failures actively damages future research. How does that skew actually work in practice?
Okay, imagine training a machine learning model to recognize a healthy cell versus a diseased cell.
Okay, got it.
If the literature the AI is scraping only contains the successful, highly optimized experiments, the model inherits a massive distortion of biological reality.
Oh, because it doesn't know what failure looks like.
Right. It is learning from a carefully curated highlight reel, not the messy reality of the actual game. Furthermore, when failures are systematically excluded, meta-analyses become heavily skewed.
So it looks like everything works all the time.
Exactly. We get an inflated sense of scientific consensus because the dissenting or failing data points are literally invisible.
And worse than that, you have grad students in labs across the world unwittingly repeating the exact same failed experiments, burning through thousands of dollars in grant money because there was no record that a lab in Germany already tried it 3 years ago and it didn't work.
That is the hidden cost of the publish or perish culture. And it's closely tied to the evaporation of tacit knowledge.
Tacit knowledge, that goes back to the scientist walking out the door with the flick of the wrist.
What's fascinating here is how broad the paper defines this. Tacit knowledge isn't just physical dexterity at the lab bench.
What else is it?
Well, in computational biology, it is the intuitive understanding of why a specific algorithm's parameter needs to be tweaked to 0.5 instead of 0.6 for a certain data set.
Like a chef just knowing how much salt to add.
Exactly. It's the unwritten troubleshooting skill that only exists in the brain of the person who built the custom pipeline.
But turnover in any industry causes knowledge loss. Why is academia so uniquely vulnerable to this?
Because modern academia runs on a hyper-transient workforce. We rely heavily on postdoctoral researchers and graduate students on short-term, like 3-year contracts.
Right. They're always moving.
They are under immense pressure to publish, and then they leave for the next position, often taking that highly specialized operational knowledge with them.
So the authors suggest a massive structural change here. They argue institutions need to shift away from this transient gig economy model of science and hire permanent staff technicians whose sole job is to maintain the institutional memory.
Yes.
But let's be real about the economics. Scientific grants are usually tied to specific novel projects. Who is going to pay the salaries for a permanent class of data archiving technicians?
Yeah, that is the friction point. The paper argues that funding agencies must recognize that paying for data stewardship is just as vital as paying for the pipettes and the chemicals.
Right.
If you don't fund the permanent maintenance of the data pipeline, the data degrades the moment the grant money dries up.
So science hides its failures and bleeds its human expertise. Think about your own job for a second. How much of what you do every day is formally written down versus just stored in your head? It's a scary thought.
It really is.
Okay, let's pause for a quick 5-minute bullet summary to lock this in.
Sounds good.
Bullet 1, big science automation is creating heterogeneous, multimodal data. Bullet 2, traditional publishing and physical freezers are failing to capture the full context.
Right, they're just breaking under the street.
Exactly. Bullet 3, null results are hidden, causing a massive waste of resources. And bullet 4, tacit knowledge evaporates due to high turnover and short-term contracts.
Spot on.
Okay, so the system is bleeding data, hiding failures, and burning out its workforce. What frameworks actually exist to patch these leaks? Because the paper dives into a massive alphabet soup of standards, starting with FAIR.
Yeah, the foundation of modern data sharing relies on the FAIR principles. Data needs to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable.
Findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable.
That's the gold standard. But the authors highlight that for computational models, we need to go further.
And I love this part. They introduce the CURE mnemonic. CURE models should be correct, unbiased, robust, and explainable.
It's a great acronym, but implementing CURE in biological modeling sounds fiercely difficult.
Right, because a model might be mathematically correct, but if it was trained on that skewed, positive results-only literature we just discussed, it isn't unbiased.
Exactly.
And if it only works on one specific supercomputer architecture, it isn't robust. And if it is a black box neural network where even the creators don't know how it reached its conclusion, it certainly isn't explainable.
Which is why having specialized repositories is so critical. We have systems doing incredible work right now. Adagene, for example.
What's Adagene?
It's a massive nonprofit repository for sharing physical plasmids, basically small circular DNA molecules.
Yeah.
They survive on a very sustainable model where researchers pay a reasonable fee to access these validated genetic tools.
Oh, that's smart.
And for data, you have the Protein Data Bank for 3D structures or GenBank for genetic sequences. They use specific file formats like FASTA or GFF to keep things standardized.
I'm looking at the tools scientists use to actually track their daily work, and there seems to be a massive canyon between the software engineers and the people at the lab bench.
There really is.
The paper contrasts a platform like GitHub with wet lab notebooks. Why is biological data so much harder to version control than software code?
That is a brilliant distinction to draw. If you write a piece of software, systems like Git and GitHub are transformative. You can track every single keystroke, every deleted line of code, and roll back to a previous version instantly.
Because text is static.
Exactly. Text is static. Biology, however, is messy and dynamic. If you put a cell in a petri dish, it is constantly metabolizing, evolving, and reacting to slight temperature changes.
You can't just hit undo on a mutating bacteria.
Right. The core hurdle is that you cannot perfectly capture the state of a living organism with a simple text-based version control system.
That makes sense.
For computational workflows, we have platforms like Galaxy or Ada that basically containerize the analysis pipelines. But for the wet lab, researchers are still relying on electronic lab notebooks, like lab archives, which require meticulous manual data entry to capture what happened to that living cell.
Which brings us back to the human element. The fragmentation is wild.
It's everywhere.
It's like having a dozen different streaming subscriptions but no universal search bar. You might have the genetic sequence in GenBank, the computational model on GitHub, and the physical protocol buried in a proprietary electronic notebook.
Yeah, the data exists, but it's siloed.
If you try to pull a thread to recreate an entire experiment, the thread snaps. So, question for you. If a stranger had to navigate your computer's filing system right now, would it pass the FAIR or CRE tests?
Most people would fail that test.
Totally, which is why the paper argues for a radical rewrite of how these platforms operate. We cannot just build more silos. We need interconnected ecosystems that actively incentivize sharing, especially for the failures.
Let's talk about how they want to handle those failures. They propose creating dedicated platforms that assign permanent DOIs, digital object identifiers, specifically for null results.
Okay.
But they changed the criteria for publication. It's no longer about whether the result was a breakthrough.
What's the criteria then?
The moderation on these proposed platforms would focus entirely on methodological rigor. Did you design the experiment correctly? Were your controls valid?
Oh, I see.
If the answer is yes, the failure is published and indexed. It becomes a permanent citable part of the scientific record. They also explore distributed storage models, citing the defunct BioTorrents platform.
BioTorrents. Like peer-to-peer file sharing for biology.
The concept is identical. While BioTorrents itself didn't survive, the underlying architecture is highly resilient. In a peer-to-peer network, the survival of a dataset depends on active community use.
Right, like seeds in a torrent.
Yes. If a dataset is valuable, it is hosted across hundreds of decentralized nodes, making it nearly impossible to lose, especially on modern cloud infrastructure.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. To solve the massive problem of standardizing the terminology across all these decentralized platforms, the authors suggest that hardcore biological scientists need to take lessons from fan fiction archives.
It sounds absurd on the surface, but mechanically, it is a profoundly elegant solution. The paper points to how fan fiction communities utilize moderated, tag-based metadata systems, what we call folksonomy.
Instead of top-down taxonomy.
Yes. If you rely on a bureaucratic committee to define a standardized ontology for a fast-moving field like synthetic biology, the terminology will be out of date before the committee even publishes its report.
They move too slow.
Way too slow. Fanfiction archives solve this by letting the community generate the tags organically.
Yeah.
A user creates a new tag for a highly specific trope.
Right.
Then community moderators, known as tag wranglers, link those synonymous or related tags together into a coherent, searchable structure in the backend.
It allows the metadata to evolve in real time alongside the culture. Let the users organize the chaos, but curate the connections. That is a brilliant piece of cross-disciplinary thinking.
It really is.
But what about capturing the physical stuff? We talk about the subtle flick of the wrist. The paper highlights a piece of technology that honestly feels a bit dystopian at first glance. Cultivarium's PRISM system.
Yeah, PRISM is an attempt to digitize that physical tacit knowledge.
How does it work?
The researcher wears a specialized headset equipped with cameras and microphones while they are physically performing the protocol at the lab bench.
Like a GoPro for science.
Essentially, yes. They narrate their actions in real time. The system records the entire session from a first-person perspective. Then an AI processes that video and audio, automatically generating a highly detailed, annotated text protocol alongside the video footage.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate. If I'm an overworked postdoc, the last thing I want is my principal investigator strapping a camera to my head to micromanage how many seconds I swirl a beaker.
It does feel invasive.
Does the paper address the sheer friction of making people use this?
The defense of systems like PRISM is that they actually reduce the manual burden of documentation. Instead of spending 3 hours typing out a protocol at the end of a long day when you've already forgotten exactly how many seconds you held a vial in the centrifuge, the documentation is generated passively while you work.
I guess that's true.
But you are absolutely correct that implementing this requires a massive cultural shift.
And it requires time. You still have to review what the AI generated.
The authors are acutely aware of this. They cite the UK's Researcher Development Concordat, which mandates 10 days a year strictly for professional development.
Okay.
The argument is that institutions must officially sanction this time and allow researchers to dedicate it to documentation, archiving, and mastering these new preservation tools. It cannot be an extracurricular activity.
It has to be baked into the actual job description. So, to summarize, moderated failure platforms, biotorrents, fanfic tags, and AI video headsets.
Quite the lineup.
Question for you. How would a community-driven tagging system change the way you search for answers in your daily life? Okay, time for our second rapid-fire bullet summary.
Ready.
Bullet 1. Fair and Curie principles act as the gold standard for data and models. Bullet 2. We have great repositories like Agene and GitHub, but they are dangerously fragmented.
Highly fragmented, yes.
Bullet 3. We need decentralized platforms to publish failed experiments. And bullet 4, AI and wearable tech like PRISM can automate the capture of physical lab skills.
Exactly right.
But as we touched on with the headsets, throwing new software or hardware at the problem will fail if the culture rejects it. How do you convince highly competitive scientists whose careers depend on being the first to publish a breakthrough to transparently share their data, their protocols, and their failures?
To overcome that, the paper insists we have to bridge deep disciplinary divides, starting with how biologists and computer scientists view the world.
They speak different languages?
They really do. Historically, biologists are hypothesis-driven. They care about the phenotype, the physical outcome of an experiment. Computational scientists prioritize algorithm development, efficiency, and generalization.
Which is why initiatives like the Combine Network are so crucial. They bring these fields together to co-design computational standards.
Yes, and you also have grassroots efforts like software carpentry and data carpentry.
What do they do?
They physically go to universities and teach wet lab biologists how to write robust code. And then you have platforms like protocols.io or BioStars, which operate sort of like a Stack Overflow for biology.
Oh, I like that.
It's a place where a researcher in Tokyo can jump online and help a researcher in Boston troubleshoot a failing PCR test in real time. The ultimate goal is for the biological sciences to fundamentally adopt an open-source software mindset.
Because in the open source software community, hoarding your code makes you irrelevant.
Exactly.
Sharing your code, maintaining libraries, and fixing bugs for others generates massive collective benefits, but crucially, it also builds individual professional prestige. You become a rock star by being helpful.
And we're starting to see the beginnings of this in biology, with the rise of preprint servers like Bioarchivar. Researchers are actively choosing to share their work publicly before it goes through the slow, formal peer review process.
Just getting it out there.
Right. They are realizing that the community value of speed and open feedback is far more useful than the old model of academic secrecy.
So what does this all mean when we bring AI into the cultural shift? We've talked about AI headsets, but obviously generative AI is going to act as a massive co-pilot for all of this data preservation.
The paper describes AI as a mechanism to create a flywheel effect. If we use AI to automate routine drafting, generate baseline metadata from a raw dataset, or constantly scan digital repositories to flag broken links, we drastically lower the barrier to entry for documentation.
But let me push back on that utopian vision.
Okay, go ahead.
If an institution tells a researcher, you must upload comprehensive metadata for every dataset or you don't get your grant money, human nature says that researcher is going to feed their data into an AI, ask it to generate 500 words of metadata, and upload the unread garbage just to check the bureaucratic box.
Yeah, that is a very real fear.
We're already drowning in AI-generated slop on the internet. Won't this just pollute the scientific record even faster?
That is perhaps the most critical risk facing this transition. The authors cite a fascinating prescient warning from a 1979 IBM training manual. A computer can never be held accountable, therefore a computer must never make a management decision.
Wow, 1979.
Yeah. The AI can draft the metadata, but a human must remain strictly in the loop. The human must review, verify, and take professional responsibility for that documentation.
But again, we're back to incentives. A researcher won't take the time to verify that AI output unless their career is rewarded for doing so.
And that is the ultimate conclusion of the paper. The incentive structures created by funding agencies and universities have to be dismantled and rebuilt.
How do we even start that?
The authors point to the Dora Concordat, a global declaration advocating that research should be evaluated on its intrinsic quality and its actual use by the community, not the prestige of the journal it is published in.
So measuring impact differently.
Exactly. If a university tenure committee starts giving as much weight to a beautifully maintained, heavily utilized dataset as they do to a novelty paper, the culture will change overnight.
You get what you measure. If you measure quality archiving, you get quality archiving.
Precisely.
So, are you comfortable letting an AI document your work? Or do you still feel the need to be the final editor of your own ideas?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, fixing the freezers, standardizing the GitHub repos, and mandating null results isn't just an IT infrastructure project.
It's much bigger than that.
It is about actively reshaping the scientific enterprise to be resilient. The ultimate goal is ensuring that the data a grad student generated this morning remains perfectly interpretable to a researcher 100 years from now who is trying to solve a crisis we can't even imagine yet.
It is about honoring the labor of discovery. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final, profound thought directly from the source material that really stopped me in my tracks.
That's a great point.
The authors note that when we talk about management systems, we usually borrow concepts from engineering. Engineering deals with human-designed structures. They are neat, they are modular. An engine has well-defined interfaces.
But biological knowledge describes evolved structures.
Right.
And evolution is inherently messy, deeply interconnected, and full of strange exceptions.
Right.
Categorizing a living, adapting system is vastly more demanding than categorizing a static blueprint.
Which raises an incredible question. Can we ever truly build a perfect static digital filing system for the absolute chaos of nature itself? Or will our data systems always have to mutate and evolve right alongside the biology they're trying to contain?
Something to think about.
Think about that the next time you find yourself apologizing for a messy desk or an unorganized hard drive. View your own process and your own failures, not as things to hide, but as vital data points for your next evolution. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.